Good evening, everyone. Welcome to NTD Tonight. I'm David Lamb, sitting in for David Zhang. Here's a preview of some of today's top stories. California versus Florida. Governors Newsom and DeSantis debated over hot topics on Fox News. We'll hear some reactions. A spike in pneumonia cases in Ohio and Massachusetts. Health officials say the recent cases are unrelated to outbreaks happening overseas. Cantaloupe facing more recalls. A salmonella outbreak continues to infect melons across the country. First up, California versus Florida. The two governors went head-to-head last night, debating everything from crime, living standards, to businesses. I hear from a Florida executive and former California County supervisor for their reactions. The governors of California and Florida debated on Thursday night on Fox, discussing economy, crime and public safety, abortion, immigration, and COVID lockdowns. During the hour-and-a-half debate, Newsom criticized DeSantis for LGBTQ policies and restrictions on abortion. But DeSantis defended Florida laws prohibiting sexually explicit books, criticizing Newsom for allowing inappropriate books in California schools. The two governors then sparred over their handling of the pandemic. Newsom said DeSantis locked down Florida before California, but DeSantis pushed back, saying California extended school closures for too long. DeSantis also had many props, and pointing to living standards, at one point he showed a map showing where feces were found in San Francisco. He also accused Newsom of running a shadow campaign for the presidency.
Gavin's not yet a candidate for president, but at the end of the day, it gave DeSantis and Gavin Newsom a platform, a national platform, to talk about their visions for the country.
Relocation consultant John Boyd told NTD he believes the two governors have different government philosophies and leadership style, but one has more people leaving the state.
You feel it when you're in San Francisco, and you feel it when you're in California or when you're in Los Angeles today. It doesn't feel safe. Again, that's not to say Florida doesn't have crime. Of course it does. But it's avoided this urban doom loop scenario that's plagued cities like San Francisco and Los Angeles and Chicago. Florida really has defying gravity with respect to its office market.
Former San Francisco supervisor Tony Hall shared his reaction with NTD.
Well, the debate last night between Newsom and DeSantis was clearly a win for DeSantis, regardless of what your political affiliation is. DeSantis won that debate. Much to my surprise, I thought Newsom would outslick him, outlie him, and out-talk him, because Newsom is a very good talker.
I think one of the major themes last night was the issue of crime, how crimes are not being prosecuted, how there's a permissive attitude in California for district attorneys that are not prosecuting things like open-air drug markets and retail theft.
Newsom said that neither DeSantis or himself will be the nominee for their party for the 2024 presidential election. In Santa Clara, California, David Lamb, NTD News. Now let's take a look at other national headlines. The House voted to expel Congressman George Santos earlier today. The New York Republican is facing 23 federal charges, including financial fraud and false statements. He's the first person to get expelled from Congress without a conviction.
On this vote, the yeas are 311, the nays are 114, with 2 recorded as present. 2/3 voting in the affirmative, the resolution is adopted, and a motion to reconsider is laid upon the table.
105 Republicans joined most Democrats in voting against him, but the 4 top GOP leaders voted to keep him. Expulsion is the most severe form of punishment for a lawmaker in the House, and Santos is just the 6th person ever to be expelled. There will be a special election in New York to fill his seat. And former Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor passed away Friday at the age of 93. She made history as the first woman to serve on the Supreme Court. President Ronald Reagan nominated her in 1981. Throughout her almost 25-year tenure, O'Connor authored over 670 opinions, including more than 300 majority opinions. She was known as a pivotal vote in many 5-4 decisions, earning her the reputation as a swing vote, although she disliked the label. Chief Justice John Roberts praised O'Connor's trailblazing role, undaunted determination, and engaging honesty. He described her as a beloved colleague and a defender of the rule of law. In the Middle East, fighting resumes between Israel and the terrorist group Hamas. Israel said the ceasefire ended because Hamas refused to release more women and children hostages, breaching previous agreements. The terrorist group began launching rockets at Israel this morning, shortly before the end of the truce. Hamas, on the other hand, said it doesn't have any more women and children to release. The Israeli government says Hamas still has 137 hostages, including 20 women and 2 minors. 3 hostages, including 2 men and a woman, were announced dead today. Meanwhile, Qatar, one of the countries helping as mediators, said talks are continuing for another ceasefire. The White House said the U.S. will continue efforts as well. And in the UK, a report from The Guardian revealed that a woman found and reported this ID card inside the sleeve of a coat she purchased from the clothing brand Regatta. It appears to belong to a Chinese prisoner. In a statement, Regatta says the ID card was that of a former factory worker in China and not a prisoner. The coat was reportedly made in a Chinese prison. However, Regatta claims the person pictured on the ID was a paid worker. Benedict Rogers, a longtime human rights advocate specializing in Asia, says if it was a Chinese prisoner sending a hidden message, it wouldn't be the first time.
So it has happened before. It's very interesting that it's actually a prisoner's identity card. That I think has not happened before. But it's a sign that products that we take for granted on our high streets and in our supermarkets and big stores, many of those products are made by Chinese prison labor. And I think we now need to be much more aware of that and think seriously about what we can do as consumers to avoid buying products that are made by prison labor in China.
In a statement, Regatta said they refute the implication they used forced prison labor, saying they found evidence the employee spent time in prison before his employment with a factory. Regatta said they are continuing to investigate how the item came to be sewn into the garment. 2 states in the U.S. now have reports of pneumonia outbreak among children. It appears to be similar to the infections in China and Europe, but there's no connection yet.
Massachusetts is the 2nd state in the U.S. to report a white lung syndrome outbreak in children following Ohio. This comes as China and Europe also saw a recent spike in hospitalizations. Physicians say the pneumonia is due to a mixture of bacterial and viral infections. When looked under an X-ray, the affected lungs appear to be lighter or whitish, hence the name. On Thursday, Ohio's Warren County Health District said so far there are 145 reported cases of pneumonia in children ages 3 to 14. No deaths have been reported as most recover at home and are treated with antibiotics. The district also said the cases are believed to be not a new virus, but one with a rather large uptick in the number of typical pediatric pneumonia cases, and that there has been zero evidence of this outbreak being connected to other outbreaks, either statewide, nationally, or internationally. The district says it's common for respiratory illnesses to spread in the community during this time of year, and that basic precautions like washing their hands and covering coughs can keep people safe.
A widespread cantaloupe recall issued amidst a salmonella outbreak. Health officials urge caution and people to discard contaminated products. Here's NTD's Stephanie Sakal with more.
What's going on with cantaloupes? A nationwide recall has been expanded for cantaloupe products, including pre-cut varieties, due to a salmonella outbreak reported by the FDA and CDC. Over 100 cases across 34 states have been identified, resulting in 61 hospitalizations, and in Minnesota, 2 deaths reported. The severity of the infections affecting vulnerable populations such as children and the elderly has led health officials to advise against consumption. They add that the actual number of cases may be higher than reported and the outbreak could extend beyond confirmed states. Health authorities recommend discarding recalled fruits and thoroughly cleaning surfaces. Whole cantaloupes labeled Malchita, Rudy, and 4050 are affected. Specific affected products from various retailers and brands including Aldi, Walmart, Quick Trip, and others have been listed in the recall. Stephanie Sikal, NTD News, California.
We'll take a short break now, everybody, but here's a look at what we have for you when we come back. Nevada mourns the loss of 2 officers. Police share the latest on the suspect and situation. People clashed at a local California board meeting. State officials now condemning those who voiced support for Hamas terrorists. Dallas Mavericks owner Mark Cuban making headlines in the world of basketball. And college football heats up. Which 4 teams can score their way into the playoffs? Those stories and more coming up on NTD Tonight. Welcome back to NTD Tonight. I'm your host, David Lamb. Nevada is mourning the loss of 2 officers fatally struck and killed. The suspect has been identified, bringing some closure to the tragic incident. NTD's Christina Corona has more on the story.
2 Nevada state troopers lost their lives in the line of duty in Las Vegas early Thursday morning.
At approximately 3:23 a.m., two Nevada State police troopers were making contact with a motorist who appeared to be sleeping behind the wheel and was pulled over to the side of the road in the area of Interstate 15 and D Street.
Moments later, police said a white Chevrolet HHR collided with the troopers.
What we know at this time is that the suspect fled the scene in an unknown direction of travel. Medical personnel responded and transported one of the troopers to UMC Trauma, where he later died. The other trooper unfortunately succumbed to his injuries at the scene.
The Nevada Highway Patrol identified the 2 troopers killed in the line of duty as Sergeant Michael Abate and Trooper Alberto Felix. The Las Vegas Metropolitan Police conducted a grid search and located the driver 5 hours after the incident.
Through our investigative measures, we were able to locate and apprehend the suspect. I want to remind everyone that this remains a dynamic and ongoing investigation being led by the LVMPD Homicide Section.
The suspect has been identified as 46-year-old Jamarcus Williams. He was arrested and booked into the Clark County Detention Center and charged for 2 counts of reckless driving resulting in death, 2 counts of driving under the influence resulting in death, and 2 counts of duty to stop at the scene of an incident involving death. In a video posted on the LVMPD X account, police can be seen escorting the bodies of Abate and Felix, taking their flag-draped caskets out of a van and carrying them into a building. According to Nevada State Police, Abate joined the department in December 2013 and was promoted to sergeant in November. Felix joined in January 2019 after serving in the United States Air Force. Christina Corona, NTD News.
Some people voiced support for Hamas during a local California board meeting. A handful even called the beheadings in Gaza propaganda. This sparked state officials to publicly respond. Comments from the public defending Hamas during a 6-hour Oakland City Council meeting this week.
They've lied about. There's not been beheadings of babies and rapings. Israel murdered their own people on October 7th.
To hear them complain about Hamas violence is like listening to a wife beater complain when his wife finally stands up and fights back.
These comments came as the board on Monday unanimously passed a resolution calling for a permanent ceasefire between Israel and the terrorist organization Hamas. In the days following, officials such as California's governor responded to the public comments, saying that Hamas is a terrorist organization. They must be called out for what they are, evil. California State Senator Scott Wiener called the comments just awful. Oakland's resolution calls for congressional and worldwide support for truce in Gaza, which has been under attack by Israeli forces following Hamas's initial attack against Israel on October 7th. The resolution also condemns the recent rise of anti-Semitic, Islamophobic, and discrimination across the world.
I demand the Council amend this resolution to include the condemnation of Hamas, a terrorist organization whose goal is Israel's annihilation and the death of all Jews.
I'm asking you to amend the proposed resolution to condemn Hamas and call for their removal.
Others cited Israel's occupation of the Palestinian land.
For me as an Arab, asking with this context to condemn Hamas is very anti-Arab racist.
Councilman Dan Kalb wanted to add a statement to condemn the mass murder of 1,200 people by Hamas, but it did not pass. Another council member, Carol Fife, did not support adding a sentence that condemns Hamas or Israel because, quote, we wanted to focus on love, life, and lifting up what we support and not what we condemn. The resolution will be forwarded to the governor, President Biden, and Vice President Kamala Harris. In Santa Clara, California, David Lamb, NTD News. In a surprising move on Tuesday evening, Dallas Mavericks owner Mark Cuban made headlines by selling a majority stake in the franchise to Miriam Adelson and her family, the largest shareholders of the Las Vegas Sands Corp., a company that owns and operates casinos and resorts in Vegas and around the world. NTD's Carlos Reyes is here to talk more about the subject. Carlos, there's big questions on everyone's mind. How much control will Cuban have as a minority owner? Could this pave the way for an NBA franchise in Las Vegas? And why did he sell?
Well, David, it sure is a head scratcher considering he's been the face of the Mavericks for so long. The dynamics of a minority owner having a significant say are a bit unclear. Cuban might still be the face, but with new pockets in the war room, decisions could get interesting. The Aldensons' commitment to partnering with Cuban is key, but we'll have to wait and see how it translates to real control. Now, I understand there's speculation about the Mavericks heading to Vegas, considering the Adelson family's ties to the Las Vegas Sands Corp. However, Mark Cuban seems to have different plans. He's shown a desire in the past about partnering with Las Vegas Sands in order to build a new arena, but it's all about turning Dallas into a tourist destination. Despite the Adelsons' Vegas connections, Cuban's long-term vision seems to be settled in Dallas. He's been vocal about building a new arena centered around a resort and a casino. For me, a Vegas move seems very unlikely.
Now, switching gears over to college football, it's conference title week, and the stakes couldn't be any higher. So, Carlos, who are the 4 teams that you think can punch their ticket into the college football playoff?
Well, for starters, David, this season is making history with all top 4 teams entering conference championship weekend undefeated. It sets the stage for some intense matchups and potential chaos in the rankings moving forward. So let's get started. If Georgia loses, Alabama and the other undefeated teams could leapfrog them. Texas, Washington, and Florida State would need to lose, creating a narrow path for the Bulldogs to reclaim a top 4 spot. On the other hand, if Michigan takes care of business against Iowa, they're in as no worse than the number 2 seed. Even with a loss to Iowa, they could still finish above Ohio State and other 2-loss teams, but it's not a guarantee. Now, Georgia, on the other hand, would fall behind Alabama if they lose the SEC title game. Now, switching over to the West Coast, Washington has a tough Pac-12 game against the Ducks, but even with a loss, they have a chance, as crazy as it may seem. It depends on other results, but they could be in contention for that number 4 spot. As for Oregon, it's win or go home. Simple as that. But a win should lock up a spot for the Pac-12 nonetheless, whether it be Washington or Oregon, heading into that number 3 or 4 spot respectively. Now, no team needs a win more than Florida State, point blank, period. Their loss, despite their absence of star quarterback Jordan Travis, puts them in a precarious position against a Louisville team that already has 2 losses. That would not look good at all on their resume. The committee values the Ducks, but a better win might keep Florida State in the discussion and manage to sneak them into that top 4 conversation. Ohio State is in a similar position as last season, but faces tougher competition this time. A lot depends on other teams' performances. As for Texas, they have a head-to-head road win over Alabama, a significant advantage, possibly the best win of the season for them. Beating Oklahoma State is crucial, and a loss by other contenders could propel them to that 4th spot. Now wrapping things up, Alabama needs to win against Georgia in their conference title match. A victory over the Bulldogs would take care of 3 spots. However, they also need some help, like a loss by Texas, Florida State, or Michigan to secure that coveted number 4 spot. They need a little bit of chaos in order to be able to sneak in. As for myself, I have the Georgia Bulldogs walking away with the number 1 spot, Michigan closely following with a number 2, and number 3 being taken by Florida State after surviving and beating Louisville in what I think will be a very scrappy game. As for the number 4 spot, I'm sorry, Washington, but Oregon has you beat. Sorry, Texas and Alabama, there's always next year, but the Oregon Ducks will be sneaking in with the number 4 spot.
All right, Carlos. Yeah, competition seems tight. Thank you so much for your analysis and insight. Have yourself a good weekend.
Thank you, David. I'll see you on the next one.
That's all we've got for you tonight. We'd like you to join us again on NTD Tonight every weekday at 9 p.m. I'm David Lamb, in for David Zane. Have yourself a wonderful weekend.